Once again, it's been an amazing series, hasn't it been? The women of the Old Testament. And we went through so many different women. And each of them have their own struggle. Each of them have their own story. Each of them have their own faith in God and sometimes some doubt. And so today we are going to go through the book of Ruth. And so read with me as we read the first verses together. 1, 2, 3. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah who sojourned in a country of Moab. He and his wife and had 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went to the country of Moab and remained there. So the story starts off, and the writer tells us, what time is it? What's happening during this time? These are the times of judges. And so Israel had not had kings yet. They had something called judges, and these were leaders that were appointed by the Lord to lead them sometimes in times of battle, sometimes to lead them spiritually and with prophecy. And so we see this family here, Elimelech and his wife, Naomi, and something happens, right? They move to a different country. They move to Moab. And their intention, it says here, sojourn. It means that they didn't intend to stay there permanently, but they intended to just stay there for a while. And so I'm going to explain this story in 7 episodes. And the first episode is this: the famine menace. There's a threat. A famine has appeared. Why would you leave from your home to another country? It must have been so bad to a point where you said, we can't stay here any longer. We can't survive here. We got to leave. And so they made this decision. And so they left the promised land. But isn't it that God said this was the land flowing of milk and honey? It's interesting. It's quite interesting. And so we see here this family moves from Bethlehem across the Jordan River to Moab. And some people think, well, maybe they're disobeying God, right? Maybe they're disobeying God. How could you go out from the promised land, the will of God for your people? Well, it also mentions in the Bible that the promise is if Israel obeys the Lord, then this land would prosper. And so possibly Israel was disobeying God at this time, and that is why the Lord was punishing them with a famine. And we see this throughout the world, right? When there is something happening in your country, could be a famine, it could be a war. What happens to these families? They move. And we're seeing that. Syria, there's a huge war, and these people think we can't survive here any longer. And they move. And this is what happened to this family. The head of this family was Elimelech, and his name meant God is king. And yet, does he live as if God is king of his life? As if he's trusting in God to provide? That's one of the questions the commentaries sometimes pose and question whether they're leaving God's plan. And we see here Naomi, her name means pleasant or lovely. And so episode 1, the famine menace. Episode 2, tragedy strikes back. Read with me. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives, and named one of them was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. and they lived there about 10 years. Both Malion and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Wow. Famine strikes. You move. You're hoping for a better place, right? This must be a better place. But what happens? Your husband dies, the head of your family. And then what happens after that? Your 2 sons die as well. They were just going to stay there for a couple of years, right? It ends up to be 10 years. 10 years. And what happens is that these women are childless widows. Childless widows. What do you think it meant to be a childless widow in the ancient Near East? Was it a position of power and wealth, or was it? No. Women didn't have the same rights you guys do to buy property and all that good stuff, right? Back then, widows, they depended on a male to help them, right? To have land, to have protection. And so because they didn't have that, these childless widows were considered the poorest people in the ancient Near East. They depended on the generosity of others. And we see here Orpah, her name means back of the neck or stiff-necked. And Ruth, it means friend. It means friend. What would you do if you were Naomi? Imagine yourself in her shoes. You've basically lost everything. You're like Job. Imagine the people you love most in your life, and they've died. What would you do? What would you do? You've hit rock bottom. You're without your treasured family members. You're considered poor, without protection. What would you do? Has anybody been rock bottom before? Have they? Yeah, some people. Good. Not good, I mean. But good that you understand me, I mean. Yes. Episode 3. The faith awakens. The faith awakens. So read with me. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard of the fields of Moab, that the Lord had visited the people and given them food. So she set out from a place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me." So she hears, I don't know what she was doing in the field. Maybe she was working the field. Maybe she was gathering some wheat, leftover wheat or whatnot. But she hears that the Lord is doing something. I've lost everything in this land. What are my options? Well, maybe there's no option left. It's time to go home. It's time to go home. And so she takes sort of a step of faith to go home. She's walking on her way, right, with her 2 daughters-in-law. When you walk in the streets of Hong Kong, it's very safe, right? Do you fear for your life? You don't. You don't. Hong Kong is one of the safest places to be at. I've traveled a lot, and I've got to say, I don't worry about, my bag getting stolen or whatnot. I feel safe in Hong Kong. Imagine 3 childless widows traveling back along the way by themselves. We've heard Jesus' parable before, haven't we? Of the Good Samaritan. Right? People robbed. There's no real borders like we have today and protection of laws and whatnot. Who knows what could have happened? So she took a step of faith. I hear God is doing something. Let me go. And as she goes along the way, she stops and she's like, my daughters-in-law. There's no point for you to follow me. It's better for you to just go back. And this was her reasoning, right? You can go back to your home. You belong in Moab, right? These are your people, your family. And you can go and find a new husband. And that'd be great. You have somebody to protect you, provide for you. It's going to be awesome. Go find another husband. And she's like, why are you following me? I'm too old to find another husband, right? If I got married today, maybe she's like 60, and I get married today, and I have a child, God blesses me on my wedding night, Careful, John says. 60's young, sorry, 60's young. I mean, yeah, who knows with technology nowadays. Maybe they had better technology back then. If God blesses me and I have a child tonight, are you going to wait for my child, my sons to grow up? And then you're going to marry them? That's her reasoning, right? It's just like, there's no point for you to follow me. You have a family and you have potential to restore your lives. And so, what would you do if you were Orpah and Ruth? Go talk to the people beside you. What would you do if you were Orpah or Ruth? Would you follow Naomi, go back, or would you go back home? Go, discuss, come on, couple seconds, 30 seconds. Life decision in 30 seconds, go. Okay, all right. If you were these daughters-in-law, who would go back home? Raise your hand. Who would go back home? All right, I see maybe one-third. One-third. Are you sure? Final answer? Final answer, okay. You win $1 million, I'm joking. Honestly, if I was the daughter-in-law, it would logically make more sense for me to go back. Yeah, go back. Head back, yes. Head back. Right? That's where my family is. They can offer me some protection. They can maybe provide and arrange another marriage or whatnot. That would make sense. And in fact, that is what Orpah decides to do. Orpah decides, oh, no, I'll go with you, Naomi. Ruth says, I'll go with you too. But then Naomi insists, no, go. It's better. And so Orpah leaves. And then Ruth is just still standing there. And Naomi's like, Ruth, what are you doing? Go follow Orpah. Go back, just like her. But she says this. Let's read it together. She says this. It's a very famous famous quote here. Not famous God. Verse 15. See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where I lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do to me, and more also to anything that put death parts me from you. Wow. This is the statement Ruth makes. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. This woman leaves everything. Her family, her friends, her home, her religion, her chance of remarriage, because her faith awakens. There's a supernatural awakening of her faith. She had no reason to believe this other religion, this other gods. She's probably never been to Israel or to Bethlehem. But somehow there's a faith that awakens inside of her. And potentially what happens is, Naomi has set such a great example, and they have such a great relationship that she doesn't want to leave her. We don't know exactly, but we can maybe take an educated guess. And so these two women go back to Jerusalem, to Bethlehem. And it's like seeing old friends after 10 years. Have you seen your high school friends after a couple of years? Oh, what are you up to? What's going on? And they're the talk of the town, right? It says here, the whole town was stirred. And they say, is this Naomi? Is it you? Maybe she's 10 years, Who knows what I'll look like in 10 years? Maybe younger. I'm joking. I'm growing my hair. She changes her name. Why does she change her name? She says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Lord has dealt bitterly with me. What did her name mean before? Lovingly, pleasant. And now it's turned purple and green to bitterness. So dramatic. I didn't even set that up myself. Back then, they would only change their name from Abram to Abraham, from Jacob to Israel. After they had a great change or experience or an encounter with God. And so you can imagine the state that she was at. Rock bottom. Episode 5. A new hope. A new hope. And we're going to see that they're going to devise a plan. Trust God's providence. And end with praise. Read with me. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth and the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, after him in whose sight I shall find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. So they go back. They could have just sat there and begged for food. No, they didn't. Ruth was hardworking. She was like, I'm determined. I want to do something about it. We may be poor. We may be at rock bottom. Nobody is protecting us, standing up for us. But no, I want to do something about it. And so she was willing to give up her time for her mother-in-law. And so she goes and gleans in the field. Gleaning is what we can see in this next picture. It's picking up the extra pieces of wheat or barley that the reapers didn't get. And in fact, that was actually an instruction from the Lord that you should help the poor and the widows by allowing them to glean in your fields. Pick up the scraps. And so she's, I'm going to go glean. I love barley. She's, just hopping around. There's the bounce in her step. She sees the fields. It's like, it's harvest time. Wow. Let's go pick up some barley. gleaning, in her new hobby. She goes and she stumbles upon the field of this man named Boaz. It just so happens. Like, wow. Providence. And who is this man? Well, Boaz is actually a relative of Elimelech. And so here we see a classic story. Boaz. Boy meets girl. Who's this new girl in my school? Oh, where is she from? Oh, she's from, I don't know, Toronto. I don't know. Oh, what's her family situation like? I see. Okay, it's interesting. Let's invite her to a meal. I'm interested in this new girl, right? And then what does Boaz do? Boaz tells the reapers, oh, just by the way, leave some extra barley along the way so that this girl could be provided for. Boy meets girl. Boy meets girl. And so, Ruth is so excited. She goes back home. She brings some of the barley she's collected and some of the extra food that she's got from from the meal with Boaz. And Naomi, she's been, cleaning up the house the whole day. And she's like, hey, Ruth, what have you been up to? You look like God has blessed you. Who have you met? Where have you gleaned? It's like your mom, when you come home, oh, where did you go today? How you doing? How's school? How's work? That's like your mom, right? And this is what Naomi does. And Naomi learns that she's gleaned where? In the fields of Boaz. And then they are like, wow, that's so cool. This man is a close relative of ours. Whoa, that's so cool. What are the chances? I live in Bethlehem. There can't be that many people, right? And he's one of our redeemers. And they're like, wow. Naomi's like praising God. Wow, it's amazing. Plan, providence, praise. And we see here, what is a redeemer? Any ideas what a redeemer is? Anybody have a redeemer in their life? It's a trick question. You should all say yes, but yes, yeah, I know. What are the responsibilities of a redeemer back then? Firstly, avenging the death of a murdered relative. Next, you're supposed to marry a childless widow of a deceased brother. So if your brother is married and he dies, you have sort of the responsibility or the privilege to marry your brother's wife. Anybody would like to do that? George? No, I'm joking, George. Redeemer. You also had the privilege of buying back land that had been sold. Maybe you sold it for whatever reason, and this is what the Redeemer does. And also buying back a member who has been sold to slavery, and also you're to take care of the needy and the helpless. This is the responsibilities of a Redeemer. And Ruth just so happened to go into the fields of Boaz. A wealthy man, honorable man, upright, generous. Wow. Episode 6, the return of Ruth. The return of Ruth. Once again, we see this same strategy or same sequence. They make a plan. We see providence, and then we wait for the praise. So let's read together. 1, 2, 3. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he had finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say, I will do. So they make a plan. Somehow, Naomi has this plan. Instead of wearing your widow clothes, now get dressed up, right? Put on this cloak, put on this new dress, and then anoint yourself. This is like, put on makeup. Instead of saying you're a widow and you're mourning, say now you're available. You're single and you're ready to mingle. Let Boaz know. Let George know. Let George know. And so where does this happen? Well, it happens in a place where they're separating barley from the straw. What a romantic place. So somehow there's a plan that Boaz is going to drink and eat, and he's going to fall asleep. We don't know why he's there. Usually, upright, not upright. I mean, usually rich people, they have other people doing this. Why is he doing it? We don't know. But somehow it's providence. And he's there, he drinks, he eats, and he falls asleep, and here comes Ruth. Is he asleep? We don't know. He's asleep now, yes. Go. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And he's sleeping, maybe he's snoring, and she uncovers his feet. I don't know, maybe they get cold feet back then. Or maybe, I don't know, cold feet. And so they have cold feet. And he wakes up, wow, my feet is so cold. What's happening here? Who is this woman? It's pitch black. Who are you? And then Boaz is like, who are you? What are you doing here? And Ruth is like, I am Ruth. I need a redeemer. Will you be my redeemer? It says here, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. She's saying, I need help. Will you redeem me? And what does Boaz say? May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is another redeemer nearer than I. Remain here. I'm going to sort it out tomorrow. Boaz blesses her. May the Lord grant you favor. Ruth is a worthy, upright, honorable woman. And he says, I'm willing to redeem. Take up this task. Get ready, George. Episode 6, the rise of the Redeemer. The rise of the Redeemer. So what happened back then? Well, they would usually go to the town gate or something like that, and they would meet, right? And they would have 10 witnesses, because that's how, things are passed officially, with witnesses. And so Boaz goes and meets the Redeemer that is closer to Elimelech and Ruth. And they're compromising. Hey, how you doing? Good to meet you. Handshake. And hey, let me tell you, there's Naomi and Ruth, and they're back, and you are the closest relative. Congratulations. Do you want to redeem them? And the guy's like, yeah, I want to redeem them. It's awesome. I can help them restore their land and also help protect them. It's going to be great. I will redeem it. And then Boaz is like, bet if you redeem them, you will also have to marry a Moabite. And he's like, I cannot redeem. This I cannot do. For whatever reason. We don't know exactly. Maybe he was already married or, he had other things going on. And so I can't redeem it. You redeem it. And so they had this, sandal flipping contest to say, it's official. Instead of signing, they just throw sandals at each other or something. I don't know. It's official. I threw my sandal at you. And so Boaz becomes the redeemer for Ruth and Naomi. Let's give a hand. Yeah. She's redeemed. And we see in these times of Judges, this whole story, the famine that came, the tragedy that struck, the faith that awakens, the hope that comes when they meet Boaz, the return of Ruth as she goes and sort of proposes, and then the rise of the Redeemer. And it all leads towards this one last thing, the last Redeemer. The last Redeemer. JP's loving it. JP's loving it. Let's read together. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth." Then Naomi took the child into her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. And he was the father of Jesse and the father of David. Wow. Isn't that amazing? The first thing that's amazing is that God uses a Moabite woman to accomplish his plan. A widow, poor, looked down upon in society. And God uses her to accomplish his plan. And what is his plan? His plan was not just for us to be redeemed in our poor situation, in our tough trials. There was a force working throughout this book. And it's funny enough, it's not mentioned often, this force. This force wasn't, in energy field or destiny. It was God. God is a living, supreme person who didn't just create the world, he sustains the world. He sustains the world. And he had in mind that this Moabite woman would be part of God's overarching plan for the redemption of mankind. And we know God made a covenant with David that his descendant would be on the throne forever. His throne would be established forever. And that was accomplished by the last Redeemer. The Redeemer that we need, who saves us. God has a plan. This story started with death and tragedy, and it ended with life and birth. It was empty, hopelessness, and it turned full and hopeful. Naomi thought she was going back to die, but God gave her new hope. And this last Redeemer doesn't just redeem us from our poor situation or whatever trials we go through. He redeems us from spiritual death to spiritual life, from sin and slavery to becoming slaves of righteousness, from spiritually poor to now we are spiritually rich because we share in the inheritance with Jesus Christ. What an amazing Father. God is an amazing Father. His plan for us is amazing. It's Father's Day, and I want to talk about my father. My father is a pastor in Toronto. He's a good friend of Pastor Lamb. That's how we met, and that's how I came to be here. My dad is an amazing person. He's so disciplined. He runs every morning. He's super disciplined. He's so passionate in sharing the gospel. He's so hardworking. But what I love most about my father is that he is always there for me when I need it the most. In the darkest of times, when I went through some big trials and struggles on my own, he embraced me in his arms. In the midst of really hard times, and maybe even some mistakes I made, he stood up for me. He was there. He was there for me. Always dependable, always there. A man of his word. I'm blessed to have a father like him. And maybe all of us don't have such a father, but let me tell you something. You have some of the best pastors in this congregation that love you, that care about you, and are there for you. And we are here for you. And we can only do what God allows us to do to the best of our ability. And so I want to conclude with these 3 things that God really wants us to work on. God uses all people. Jew, Gentile, women, men, widows, rich. God uses all people, and we need to find our identity in him. Not in what the world says, not in what the world says we should be or could be or shouldn't be. We need to find our identity in Christ. We need to have faith in his plan. Do you have faith in God's plan? Do you have faith in God's plan? That not only does he want what's best for you, but he wants to save you for eternity. He wants to save you for eternity. You know, this life, it's temporary. This world has been corrupted by sin. But God's plan is that one day in eternity, we will be with him forever. That is his plan, and that is our hope. And during this time when we trust Jesus and we ask him into our life, he's working on our character so that we can become more like him. More like Ruth and her trust in a God that is unknown. Her hard-working attitude, laying herself down like a servant. Boaz, who is generous, upright. God wants to build our character, to become more like Jesus, more like him. Let's close our eyes as the band comes up. And we're going to sing this song. It's called Good, Good Father. Oh, not Good, Good Father. The goodness of God. Very good song. And as we sing it, let's be reminded that God is here for us. No matter what circumstance we are, in poorness, in rich, in trial, in blessing, God is here. Trust him that he has a plan, that he is good. Let's stand and worship together.